Hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today, I bring you the next chapter in the story of Officer Lee and Sam. A chapter that, from its very first moment, carries a different feeling, slower, deeper, and far more fragile. This time, something truly special is about to happen. It is the first time Lee brings Sam to the New Year gathering at his workplace. An event that marks a fresh beginning after a long year filled with pressure, tension, and countless sleepless shifts. For many, it is simply a New Year party, a bit of food, casual conversation, a few lucky wishes, and then everyone goes home. But for Lee, it is a milestone. And for Sam, it means far more than she ever dared to imagine. Because this is not just the first time she steps into the place where Lee works. It is the first time she steps into his world, a world she has always stood at the edge of, watching from afar, full of admiration and just as much insecurity. And it is also here that something unexpected happens, forcing both of them to face emotions they have never dared to name. Emotions that have existed for a long time, merely hidden beneath busyness, responsibility, and days that seemed calm on the surface. Let's follow today's story and see how everything slowly begins to unfold. That evening, the police unit hosted its New Year gathering. The atmosphere inside the compound was different from usual. Hallways that were normally strict and silent were now brighter, livelier. Laughter replaced the familiar short commands. This was one of the most important events of the year. Not just a New Year gathering, but a rare moment for officers to set work aside, unwind after months of intense pressure, reconnect with colleagues, and see familiar faces who had endured countless overnight shifts together. Many brought their wives or girlfriends along. There was no need for grand introductions or flowery words. Simply appearing together was enough to silently say, "This is the person I cherish, the one standing beside me in life, and I am proud of that." While Lee was outside, adjusting his collar and making sure his coat sat neatly, inside the room Sam stood still in front of a large mirror. She stood there for so long that she didn't even realize how much time had passed. Time seemed to slow down. In the mirror was a woman with a gentle face, slightly downcast eyes, carrying traces of a life that had not been easy. The dress she wore was not expensive, nor fashionable. But it was the nicest one she owned. The same dress she had taken out, folded, unfolded, tried on, and changed again all afternoon, standing in front of the mirror again and again, asking herself whether it would be acceptable. The soft light in the room fell across her face, highlighting the nervousness in her eyes. The anxiety did not stay quietly in her chest. It spread to her fingertips. She slightly turned, instinctively smoothing the hem of her dress, as if adjusting it one more time might ease the unease. Her lips pressed together. Her eyes filled with hesitation. She whispered softly, her voice so small it nearly dissolved into the quiet of the room, as if she were speaking only to herself through the mirror. "Lee, do I look strange like this? I'm afraid I don't belong in the place where you work." That question had never really been about clothes. It was the result of years of insecurity. Years of doing whatever work she could to survive. Early mornings at the market. Curious, judgmental glances. Casual questions that sounded harmless but made her feel small. Awkward speech. Hesitation in formal spaces. The constant feeling of being inadequate, of having to be careful, of fearing she might disappoint someone. Sam had never belonged to elegant places. And she had never imagined stepping into a disciplined environment like the police force, a world she believed was filled with confident, capable people who spoke fluently, stood tall, and never wavered. She was always afraid she didn't belong there. Afraid of others' eyes. Afraid that standing beside Lee would make him seem out of place among his colleagues. Lee heard her question. He didn't answer right away. He stepped closer, slowly, gently placing a hand on her shoulder. His hand was warm, steady. He softly adjusted the strand of hair falling across her forehead, a familiar, natural gesture. Every movement carried quiet reassurance, without exaggeration, without long explanations. Their eyes met through the mirror. In that moment, all other sounds faded away. Lee's gaze was warm and steady, without the slightest doubt. No judgment. No hesitation. Only calm certainty. "You are the person I love," Lee said slowly, each word clear. "And to me, you don't need to become anyone else to fit in. Not flattery. Not empty comfort. But affirmation." Something in Sam's heart slowly loosened. The tension she had carried all afternoon eased just a little. She looked at herself in the mirror again, but this time not through her usual self-critical eyes. She saw herself through his. No longer a woman afraid of not being good enough, not worthy of standing beside him, but the woman he chose, the woman he brought with him, the woman he never tried to hide. Sam took a gentle breath. She nodded softly. Her heart still raced. The anxiety hadn't disappeared completely. But it no longer consumed her. Lee smiled, took her hand, still slightly cold from nerves, and squeezed it gently, like a promise that didn't need words. "Come with me." She lowered her head, smiling shyly. She didn't say anything more. But in her eyes, there was new courage, fragile, trembling, yet real. Outside, the soft sound of an engine faded into the distance. The early New Year air carried a gentle chill, slipping through the folds of clothing. Yet inside Sam, the warmth from Lee's words lingered intact, like an invisible thread guiding her forward. Each step away from the familiar room carried a slight tremor, but also a fragile, quiet sense of trust, thin as it was, still struggling to exist. She did not know that, at the party she believed would be joyful, a wound was already waiting in silence. The hall glowed with New Year decorations. Golden and silver lights were strung across the ceiling, reflecting off the polished floor below. Warm light bathed every face, every corner of each table. Spring music played softly, not too loud, just enough to create a festive feeling while preserving a sense of formality. Laughter and conversation intertwined, New Year wishes echoed repeatedly. The aroma of hot food spread through the space, blending with the familiar scent of perfume worn by people in the force. Everything seemed warm. Lively. Full of hope. Sam walked beside Lee, her hand resting in his. The feeling was both unfamiliar and familiar. Unfamiliar because this was her first time in a place like this, familiar because Lee's steadiness gave her something to hold on to. She tried to keep her breathing even, reminding herself that all she needed to do was walk beside him, nothing more. But the moment Lee stepped into the hall, holding Sam's hand, the atmosphere around them subtly shifted, just enough for those involved to feel it, even though no one said a word. Eyes began to turn. Some glanced briefly, then looked away, curiosity satisfied. Others stared longer, their gaze lingering on Sam for several seconds, slow, measuring. A colleague recognized Lee and called out cheerfully, his voice filled with familiarity. The deputy team leader finally brought his girlfriend along. Lee smiled and nodded calmly in response. The smile was neither showy nor evasive. He tightened his grip on Sam's hand slightly, a completely natural reflex. But behind the laughter, whispers began to surface, low, quiet, yet not quiet enough to go unheard. "Is she really his girlfriend? She looks so plain. I heard, she can't even read." Each word landed in Sam's ears with chilling clarity. Her steps faltered for a brief moment. Instinctively, her hand tightened around Lee's. She didn't dare lift her head. The lights overhead suddenly felt harsher, the music seemed to fade away, all surrounding sounds blurred, leaving only those words echoing in her mind. She felt as if she were standing in a space far too vast, while she herself was unbearably small. I shouldn't have come. The thought flashed through her mind, quick, sharp. Then someone stepped forward. It was a young female officer, a familiar face within the unit. She was neatly dressed, confident in posture, her gaze sharp. She had often appeared beside Lee during meetings, and she was also someone who had quietly admired him, something many in the unit were aware of. She stopped in front of him. Her lips curved into a thin smile, not quite friendly, not entirely cold. Her eyes moved from Lee first, then slowly settled onto Sam. "Officer Lee," she said slowly, each word precise. "I thought you'd come alone. I didn't expect you to bring your girlfriend." The emphasis made the sentence sound more like an evaluation than a greeting. Her gaze swept over to Sam, from the simple dress to the shoes worn thin by time. It needed no words, yet carried clear judgment. Lee's voice remained steady, as calm as ever. "This is to Sam. My girlfriend." He spoke plainly, no detours, no further explanation. But the female officer let out a faint, dismissive laugh, the corner of her lips lifting slightly. "You used to date intelligent, well-educated women. Your taste has really changed." The space seemed to freeze. The music continued to play, yet felt pushed far away. Those standing nearby fell into silence, a few glances darted over, then quickly turned aside. To Sam's face drained of color. Shame surged up, tightening her breath. Her ears burned, her heart pounding so loudly she felt it might be heard. Her trembling fingers clenched the small bag in her hand, knuckles turning white. She wanted to disappear. To pull her hand away. To turn around and run outside, somewhere without eyes like these. "I don't belong here." The thought rose again, heavier than before. At that moment, Lee stepped forward. He placed himself in front of her, not loudly, not aggressively, but firmly enough to create a clear boundary. His posture was straight, his gaze turned cold, entirely different from the warmth moments before. "You are insulting my girlfriend," he said, his voice low and decisive. The female officer paused briefly, then shrugged. "I'm just stating the truth." Lee looked directly into her eyes. "No avoidance. No concession. No one suits me better than her," he said slowly. "And I will not allow anyone, even a colleague, to belittle the person I love." His voice was not loud. But every word landed with weight. Silence spread through that area. The whispers stopped. No one spoke. The female officer stood frozen for a few seconds, her expression shifting. She pressed her lips together, said nothing more, then turned and walked away. The sharp sound of her heels striking the floor echoed, dry and hard, through the brightly lit, crowded hall. And to Sam, standing behind Lee, had yet to fully recover from the moment. Lee turned toward to Sam. It was only a brief moment, yet his gaze softened completely. All the firmness and cold restraint from earlier, the look he had used to face colleagues and confrontation, faded away. In front of to Sam now, Lee was no longer the stern deputy team leader, nor the man who had just defended her in a crowded hall. He was simply Lee, a man looking at the woman he loved, with concern and quiet understanding. He could see clearly what she was trying to hide. Her shoulders were still slightly drawn in, as if protecting herself. Her hand was still trembling, even as she held tightly onto his. Her eyes remained lowered, avoiding the lights, avoiding the faces from moments ago, as if one more glance might cause everything she was holding back to spill over. Lee exhaled softly, then spoke in a low, steady voice. Let's go home. It wasn't a rushed decision. It wasn't an escape. It was a choice he had already made clearly in his mind. Sam paused. She looked up at him, confusion flickering briefly in her eyes. In that instant, many thoughts overlapped in her mind. She knew how important this gathering was to him. She knew it was a rare occasion for him to stay longer with colleagues, to maintain relationships necessary for his work. She feared that leaving now might cause him to be judged, that others might think he had neglected responsibility for personal reasons. But, the unit's New Year party, she whispered. Her voice was so soft that only the two of them could hear. She didn't finish the sentence. The rest lived in her apologetic gaze, in her genuine hesitation. She didn't want him to abandon anything because of her. She didn't want to be the reason he felt caught in an awkward position. Lee looked at her for a long moment. Then he gently shook his head, as if none of that mattered anymore. It's not more important than you. 4 words. Simple. Decisive. No explanation was needed. No proof required. It was a priority stated clearly, without hesitation. And that certainty left Sam with nothing more to say. Lee didn't wait for her to object. He took her hand, warm and steady, and led her out of the hall. The first steps were slow, as if allowing her time to adjust, but with each step, his pace grew more certain. The bright lights behind them faded. The music, the laughter, the curious stares, all were left behind beyond the large doors. They left together. Outside, the early New Year night air was far colder than inside the hall. Wind from the river swept through, carrying cool moisture, brushing against collars and hair. The riverside road lay quiet, streetlights stretching into pale ribbons of light. There were no voices, no scrutinizing eyes. Only the two of them walking side by side, unhurried. Sam walked beside Lee, but her thoughts had not yet settled. The words from earlier surfaced, faded, then returned again. The judging looks. The whispered comments. They were still there, but no longer as sharp as before. They were pushed back by the feeling of Lee's hand holding hers, firm, unwavering. They stopped by the riverbank. The water stretched out before them, quietly reflecting the streetlights in trembling streaks of light. A gentle breeze carried the familiar scent of the river. The silence was deep enough that Sam could hear her own heartbeat, still slightly fast from emotions that had yet to fully calm. Lee took off his jacket. Without a word, he draped it over her shoulders. His movements were slow and careful, as if afraid of startling her. The jacket still held his warmth, wrapping around shoulders chilled by the wind, and by the hurt she had just endured. Sam lowered her head, her hands instinctively gripping the edge of the jacket. Her throat tightened. There was so much she wanted to say, yet she didn't know where to begin. She was afraid that if she spoke at all, more tears would fall. Lee stood beside her in silence for a moment. He looked at the river, then back at her. His voice was soft, low, and unhurried, as though every word had been carefully chosen. "I don't need you to be perfect," he said. "I don't need you to be exceptional." He paused, giving the words time to reach her, to sink into the tangled thoughts still swirling inside. "I just need you." Not a grand promise. Not words meant to overwhelm or raise expectations. Just the simplest truth, and the one thing Sam had never heard from anyone before. Tears fell. Quietly. Without sobs. Without hurried wiping. They slid down her cheek and onto Lee's sleeve, leaving a small, damp mark. These were no longer tears of humiliation like those in the hall. No longer the pain of being looked down upon, of being measured and compared. They were the tears of someone who, for the first time, felt clearly protected. Placed in a position that mattered. Chosen, without needing to be better, smarter, or different. Lee turned to look at her. His gaze softened, deepened. He raised a hand and gently wiped away the tear still clinging to her cheek. His touch was light, slow, as if afraid of shattering the fragile moment. "You are my pride," he said. He didn't say it loudly. He didn't emphasize it. Yet to Sam, it rang clearer than any sound in the night. Clearer than the whispers from earlier. Clearer than the insecurity that had followed her for so many years. And for the first time in her life, Sam believed it. Believed that she was not just someone who walked beside another. Not merely a shadow behind him. But someone loved, cherished, exactly as she was. The river wind continued to blow. The water flowed on in silence. The two of them stood together, saying little, yet the distance in their hearts had already changed. Their story is not over. The trials ahead still remain. Stay tuned for the next episode to continue following the emotional journey of Officer Lee and Sam, as they face what lies ahead together, steady, side by side.
Xin chào mọi người. Rất vui được gặp lại mọi người trong video hôm nay của mình. Chúc mọi người có một ngày mới vui vẻ, hạnh phúc và một ngày làm việc tràn đầy năng lượng. Hy vọng rằng những video của mình sẽ mang đến niềm vui cho mọi người, cũng như giúp mọi người thư giãn sau một ngày làm việc mệt mỏi. Hiện tại thì kênh của mình đang phát hành những video vào khung giờ 7 giờ tối và 7 giờ sáng tại Việt Nam. Nếu mà mọi người yêu thích những câu chuyện của mình thì nhớ like, share, bật chuông thông báo để nhận thông báo khi mình đăng video mới nhất. Và cũng để lại cho mình một số nhận xét ở dưới phần bình luận để mình có động lực làm nhiều video hơn và cải thiện những video sau hay và hấp dẫn hơn cho mọi người cùng xem. Cảm ơn mọi người đã lắng nghe hết một phút chia sẻ của mỗi video của mình. Hy vọng sẽ được đồng hành cùng mọi người trong những video tiếp theo. Và hẹn gặp lại mọi người ở trong video lần tới nhé.